The Pacific stretched before us, calm and blue on that spring morning in 1989. I stood on the deck of the Oceanic Explorer, going over our mission details one last time. What lay ahead should have been routine. A simple retrieval of a fallen submarine antenna at 350 meters. Nothing I hadn't done before. Nothing that should have gone wrong. Final checks in 15, I announced to my team, my voice carrying across the deck despite the ocean breeze. I picked Andrew and Thomas for this mission because I've worked with both of them underwater for years. They each brought important skills to our team. Andrew was great with details, which made him perfect for documentation and observation. Thomas was incredibly good with the technical side, knowing exactly how to handle all the submarine systems. The three of us gathered around the deck table where our mission plans were clipped down to keep them from blowing away. The papers showed the antenna's last known coordinates, dropped during a military communication test gone wrong 3 days ago. 6 hours total, I said, tracing the planned descent path with my finger. 1 hour down, 2 hours for retrieval, 1 hour up, plus contingency time. We'll be back for a late lunch. Thomas nodded. Water pressure at 350 meters will be about 35 atmospheres. The Mako can handle triple that, but we'll need to watch the viewport seals carefully. The Mako was our submarine. It was 10 meters long and shaped like a teardrop. I'll set up the cameras to document the entire retrieval, Andrew added, his voice carrying that slight edge I'd come to recognize over the years. Pre-dive tension. Some divers got it, some didn't. Andrew always did, then settled once we were actually underwater. I left them to finish getting ready and walked around the Mako. I checked each bolt, weld point, and seal on the hull. 10 years earlier, off the coast of Alaska, I'd nearly died when a loose oxygen valve failed deep underwater. The other diver with me wasn't as lucky. Since then, I'd developed what my ex-wife called an obsessive pre-dive ritual. I called it staying alive. Checking for gremlins again, Anderson? Captain Martinez appeared beside me, his weathered face creased in what might have been amusement. Always, I replied without looking up from my inspection. How's our weather window looking? Martinez was old-school Navy. I respected how he ran his ship. At sea, chain of command wasn't just rules, it was survival. Ideal conditions, barometric pressure steady at 1013 millibars, wind 5 knots from the southwest, gentle swell, negligible current at depth based on our monitoring buoys. You won't get better conditions if you wait a month. He handed me the printed weather report. Surface temperature 22 Celsius, dropping to approximately 6 degrees at your working depth. I nodded, tucking the report into my breast pocket. Any shipping traffic we should be aware of? Nothing scheduled within 20 nautical miles of our position. You'll have a clear overhead. With Martinez's weather brief done, I went back to my inspection, checking the sub from back to front. Everything looked good. All seals tight, bolts secure, and external lights working. Only after I checked everything on my list did I finally let myself chill a bit. The sub was already packed with our gear, tools for antenna retrieval, backup air systems, emergency food, all the usual stuff. Thomas had set up all the onboard systems last night. I spotted Andrew by the starboard rail, looking out at the ocean. His knuckles were white from gripping the metal. "You good?" I asked, joining him. He startled slightly. "Yeah, just the usual." I knew the usual meant his pre-dive anxiety, but something in his posture suggested it might be more this time. "Anything specific bothering you?" Andrew shook his head. "Just a bad feeling. Probably nothing." In another line of work, I might have pressed further. In diving, everyone had bad feelings sometimes. The ocean demanded respect, and a healthy dose of fear kept you sharp. I clapped him on the shoulder. "We've got good conditions and a simple mission. We'll be back up before you know it." Someone called out to get ready for going under. The three of us changed into our specialized dive suits, thin ones for thermal protection in case the sub's systems failed. Just in case. The crane operator moved the big yellow metal arm over the Mako. Steel cables came down and hooked to 4 strong points on the submarine. The sub lifted off its rack and swung out over the ocean. "Comms check," Thomas said, adjusting his headset as we prepared to board. "Reading you," I confirmed. "Clear," Andrew added. We climbed down the short ladder into the Mako's interior. The space was cramped but well designed. 3 acceleration couches faced forward toward the control console and the large viewport. Behind us, equipment storage and a small bathroom facility. Every inch of space had a job. I took the pilot's position, central and forward. Thomas sat to my right at the technical station, Andrew to my left at the observation post. We went through the pre-dive checklists quickly from having done them so many times. Oceanic Explorer, Mako ready for descent, I reported through the communication system. Acknowledged, Mako. You are clear for drop in 30 seconds. Good hunting. Martinez's voice came through with perfect clarity. I felt the boat move as the crane lowered us to the water's surface. The gentle rocking as we touched down. Then the feeling of floating taking hold. The cables detached with a series of metallic clanks. "Sealing outer hatches," Thomas announced, pressing the appropriate controls. The satisfying thunk of the mechanisms engaging reminded me why I trusted him with our technical systems. "Beginning descent," I said, activating the ballast controls. Water rushed into the external tanks, and we began to sink beneath the waves. Sunlight filtered through the viewport, making patterns dance across our control panels. Then, gradually, the blue darkened. 50 meters, 100 meters. The light from above got dimmer until only our external floodlights lit up the water around us. I felt the usual calm washing over me. Up on the surface, there were people, politics, bills, relationships, complications. Down here, everything simplified. Pressure, oxygen, navigation, the basics of survival. The sonar pinged steadily, measuring our depth and checking for obstacles. Thomas monitored our descent rate, making small adjustments to keep us on track. "Passing 200 meters, he announced. "All systems nominal." Andrew had relaxed somewhat, focused now on monitoring our external cameras. Visibility approximately 15 meters with current lighting. No marine life of significant size detected. The darkness outside was almost complete now, a black so deep it seemed solid. Our lights made a bubble of visibility around us beyond which anything or nothing could exist. Some people found that terrifying. I found it comforting. The deep ocean was my safe place, the spot I understood better than anywhere on land. 300 meters, Thomas updated, approaching target depth. I adjusted our descent angle slightly, bringing us more directly over the antenna's reported coordinates. The sonar would detect its metal signature long before we could see it visually. "Beginning final approach," I said, feeling completely in my element as we continued our journey into the abyss. The depth gauge read 350 meters as I leveled out our descent. The Mako's hull creaked slightly under the immense pressure, a normal sound at this depth, but one that always made you pay attention. 35 atmospheres pushed against every square centimeter of our vessel, enough to crush anyone without protection. "We've reached target depth," I announced, already adjusting our trim to maintain a stable position in the water column. "Confirming 352 meters," Thomas replied, his fingers moving across his control panel. "All systems operating within parameters. Hull integrity at optimal levels." Tiny particles floated through our beams, marine snow, the constant shower of organic matter that drifted from the surface to feed the deep-sea ecosystem. "Sonar indicates we're approaching the coordinates," Thomas said. "Range to target approximately 40 meters, bearing 020. I changed our direction, and the Mako submarine did exactly what I expected. The screen showed we were right next to where the antenna was supposed to be. We were basically on top of it. "Andrew, do you have visual confirmation?" I asked, peering through the viewport for any sign of our target. Andrew leaned forward, looking around the seafloor through both the viewport and the external camera feeds on his monitor. "Nothing yet. Visibility's about 12 meters with current lighting configuration. Seafloor appears to be uniform silt, no visible debris. That was odd. According to our briefing, the antenna stood approximately 3 meters tall. It should have been visible by now, especially against the relatively flat seafloor. "Thomas, verify coordinates," I said, maintaining our position with small adjustments to the thrusters. He double-checked the navigation system. "Coordinates confirmed. We're within 5 meters of the reported position." He paused, running a diagnostic on the sonar system. Sonar is functioning correctly. No errors detected. The three of us exchanged glances in the blue-tinted light of the cabin. Something wasn't adding up. "Could currents have moved it?" Andrew suggested, still scanning methodically through the camera feeds, switching between the different external viewing angles. "Unlikely," I replied. "That antenna design has a weighted base specifically to prevent drift. Even in strong currents, it shouldn't have moved more than a few meters." I maneuvered us in a tight circle around the coordinates, expanding our visual search. Thomas adjusted the external lights to maximum intensity, pushing our visibility range as far as possible. "Let's try a structured search pattern," I decided after we'd made a full circle with no results. Expanding squares, 5-meter increments. I began searching in a pattern, driving the submarine in an expanding square around the reported coordinates. First 5 meters out in each direction, then 10, then 15. Andrew kept his eyes glued to the camera feeds while Thomas checked sonar for any metal signature that might indicate the antenna. 20 minutes into our search, Thomas spoke up. "Still nothing on sonar that matches the antenna's profile. This doesn't make sense." "Could the coordinates themselves be wrong?" Andrew asked, the tension evident in his voice despite his efforts to remain professional. I shook my head. "Possible, but unlikely. Those coordinates came directly from the military vessel that lost it. They had GPS positioning." We continued our expanding search for another 20 minutes, reaching a radius of almost 100 meters from the original coordinates. The antenna was simply not there. "We need to contact the surface," I said finally. "Let them know the situation." Thomas turned on our underwater communication system that used ultra-low frequency waves to get through the water. "Oceanic Explorer, this is Mako. We've reached target coordinates, but the antenna is not visible. We've done an expanding search with no luck. Requesting guidance. Over." We waited for the response, which came nearly a minute later, a bit fuzzy because of how deep we were. "Mako, Oceanic Explorer. Understood. Command suggests expanding search radius to 500 meters. The antenna is priority recovery. Take additional time if needed. Over." Acknowledged, Oceanic Explorer. Expanding search to 500 meters. We'll update with findings. Mako out. Thomas looked at me. "Looks like we're going to be down here longer than planned." I nodded. "Let's continue the search pattern, and let's increase sonar sensitivity. Even if it's partially buried, we should be able to detect the metal signature." As Thomas adjusted the sonar settings, I expanded our search pattern, spiraling outward from the original coordinates in a grid. The boring routine of deep-sea work settled over us, the constant noise of life support systems, the occasional click and whir of equipment, the blue glow of instrument panels reflected on our faces. After nearly 40 minutes of additional searching, Thomas suddenly sat up straight in his seat. "I'm getting something on sonar," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet concentration in the cabin. "Bearing 115, range approximately 200 meters. I adjusted our heading toward the reading, curiosity mixing with professional relief at finally having a potential target. "Is it the antenna?" Andrew asked, already adjusting the external cameras to face the new direction. Thomas looked unhappy at his display. "I don't think so. The profile is much larger than what we're looking for." "How much larger?" I asked, maintaining our course toward the sonar contact. Thomas tapped several keys, running calculations based on the sonar return. "Based on initial readings, at least 40 meters in length." 40 meters? Andrew repeated, disbelief evident in his voice. "That can't be right. The antenna is 3 meters tall." "Could be a rock formation," I suggested, though something about Thomas's expression made me doubt it. Or a sunken vessel not on the charts. Whatever it is, it's not what we came for, Thomas said, still studying the sonar returns. But it might be worth investigating. Could be the antenna landed near this larger object, which is why the coordinates seem off. I thought about what to do. We had already spent over an hour searching with no sign of our target. This new finding, while unexpected, might help us figure out where the antenna really was. We'll check it out, I decided. Keep monitoring that contact. I drove the Mako toward the strange sonar reading and sped up a little. The submarine moved through the water smoothly. As we got within 150 meters, Thomas's face changed from concentration to confusion. "That's strange," he said, adjusting settings on his console. "What is it?" I asked, not taking my eyes off our heading. "The object appears to be expanding, getting larger." "Expanding?" Andrew leaned over to look at Thomas's display. "How is that possible?" Thomas shook his head. "I don't know." Initial readings gave it a length of approximately 40 meters. Now it's reading closer to 45. The shape is changing slightly, too. I felt nervous as I thought about it. I'd spent enough time in the deep ocean to develop a healthy respect for the unknown, and at 350 meters, the unknown was everywhere. "Could it be a school of fish?" Andrew suggested. "Or maybe a large patch of kelp moving with currents?" "Not at this depth," I replied, "and the sonar return is too solid for organic material like that." We continued our approach, now within 100 meters of the contact. I switched our external lights to long-range configuration, trying to penetrate the darkness ahead of us. "Visual distance in approximately 50 meters, I said, slowing our approach to a crawl. "Andrew, all cameras recording?" "All cameras active and recording," he confirmed, tension evident in his posture. Still no visual contact. Thomas continued monitoring the sonar. Object now reading at nearly 50 meters in length. This doesn't make any sense. I was getting more and more nervous about what I'd been feeling. When you're in the deep ocean, being careful keeps you alive. "Reducing speed," I announced, throttling back to minimal forward movement. "Let's approach this carefully until we have visual confirmation." The submarine crept forward through the black water. Our powerful lights should have begun revealing whatever lay ahead, but oddly there was nothing visible yet. 30 meters to contact, Thomas reported. "Sonar signature is shifting. It's almost as if the object is moving, but not changing position." "That's impossible," Andrew said, but his voice lacked conviction. I watched the black void ahead of us, straining to see anything in our light beams. We should have visual by now. 20 meters to contact, Thomas continued, a new edge in his voice. "Mike, I'm getting some very unusual readings here. The density seems to be fluctuating." I hovered my hand over the reverse thrusters, instinct telling me to be ready for rapid withdrawal. "Andrew, boost the light intensity. Maximum power." Andrew complied, and our lights blazed even brighter, yet the water ahead remained empty. Just more marine snow floating in our beams against absolute darkness. 10 meters to contact according to sonar, Thomas reported. His voice had dropped to just above a whisper, as if afraid of being overheard. We should be able to see it clearly. But there was nothing there. Nothing visible, at least. Just empty water where a massive object should be. The difference between what our instruments showed and what we could see made everyone tense. The submarine felt even smaller as we got more worried. The three of us had been a team long enough to know when something was off, even if we couldn't say exactly what it was. "Full stop," I ordered, bringing the submarine to a complete halt. We hung suspended in the water, our lights probing the darkness where sonar told us something massive waited. Thomas's hands moved quickly across his console. "Running full diagnostic on sonar systems. This makes no sense. The readings are clear and strong." Andrew zoomed the cameras to maximum resolution, checking methodically through the darkness. Nothing visible on any frequency. I'm checking infrared. The infrared camera showed the same empty water. No heat differential, no massive object where our instruments insisted one existed. The mismatch between our technology and our senses created a weird feeling that filled the cabin. After several minutes of cross-checking instruments and finding no explanation, I made a decision. "We'll move closer," I said, "but slowly. Be ready for immediate withdrawal." I inched the submarine forward using the smallest possible thruster adjustments. The sonar continued to show the massive object directly ahead of us, now apparently over 50 meters in length. 5 meters to contact, Thomas said quietly. We should be almost touching it. Yet our lights revealed nothing but empty ocean. I made a final decision. We're going to do a physical pass through the area. If there's something there our eyes can't see but sonar can detect, we'll feel it through the submarine. I drove the Mako forward very carefully, watching for any change in how our submarine was handling that might tell us we hit something we couldn't see. We went through the exact spot where sonar showed something big, but felt nothing and saw nothing. But as we moved through, Thomas sat up straight in his seat. "It's behind us now," he said, staring at his display. "The sonar shows it's moved, or we passed through it somehow." I turned the submarine in a tight circle, bringing our lights to bear on the area we'd just traversed. Still nothing visible. "This doesn't make sense," Andrew said, his earlier anxiety now transformed into focused confusion. Could it be some kind of sonar anomaly? A temperature layer or density difference in the water column? "Not like this," Thomas replied, shaking his head. "I've never seen readings this clear for a natural phenomenon." Something about the situation triggered an instinctive caution in me. The same feeling I'd had during particularly dangerous dives when something wasn't right. At these depths, intuition sometimes outperformed instruments. "Let's continue investigating," I decided, "but maintain safe distance and be ready for immediate ascent if needed. Something strange is happening here, and I want to understand what we're dealing with." I moved the submarine, pointing our lights and instruments toward the strange reading. The sonar continued to show a massive object where our eyes saw nothing but empty water. The contradiction created a growing tension in our small vessel as we prepared to check out what couldn't be seen but somehow existed in the deep. The sonar readings continued to puzzle us as I repositioned the Mako to face the anomaly. The blue glow of the instrument panels cast shadows across our faces as we stared at the contradiction between our sensors and our eyes. "I'm getting clearer readings now," Thomas said, his fingers working across his console. "The object's dimensions have increased again. He paused, double-checking his calculations. "It's now reading over 40 meters in length." "That's impossible," Andrew muttered, leaning over to study Thomas's display. "Let me cross-check this against the backup sonar." He pulled up the submarine's secondary sonar system, running an independent scan of the area ahead. After a moment, he looked up with widened eyes. Confirmed, both systems show the same readings. I kept my hands steady on the controls, maintaining our position while trying to make sense of what our instruments were telling us. Whatever this was, it wasn't the antenna we'd been sent to recover. Could it be moving underwater currents creating false readings? I suggested, though I doubted it myself. Our instruments were too sophisticated to be fooled by something so basic. Thomas shook his head. "Not like this. These readings are too solid, too—" His words cut off as the sonar display suddenly changed. The object, previously stationary, now moved on the screen, accelerating directly toward our position. "It's coming at us!" Thomas shouted, his professional composure cracking. I reacted instantly, my underwater training kicking in. I quickly worked the controls, making a sharp side turn that pushed the Mako's thrusters as hard as they could go. The submarine leaned heavily, making loose stuff slide across the cabin. "Thomas, lights! Maximum power, all arrays!" His hand slammed the light controls, sending all power to our external floodlights. bright white light blasted into the water ahead of us. For a second, there was nothing but bright, empty water. Then something huge appeared as our lights reached further into the water. A pale, see-through, tube-shaped thing swam through our light. Its skin looked sick and white, both soaking up and bouncing back our lights in a strange way. I was shocked by how big it was, bigger than anything I'd ever seen, and how smoothly such a huge thing moved through the water. "What is that thing?" Andrew whispered, his camera clicking rapidly as he documented the creature. The front of the cylinder turned toward us, showing a mouth, a huge round opening with rings of white, hook-shaped things lining it. They didn't look like normal teeth at all, but something totally foreign and disturbing. These hooks moved and twitched as the opening got bigger. "What the hell is that?" Thomas yelled, his face drained of color as he stared through the viewport. I yanked the throttle controls into full reverse, pushing our engines to maximum thrust away from the creature. The submarine shuddered as the propulsion system fought against the water's resistance. "Surface contact now," I ordered, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Andrew activated the communication system, his hands shaking visibly. "Oceanic Explorer, this is Mako. Emergency situation. We have encountered an unknown biological entity of massive proportions. Current coordinates are..." The rest of his transmission cut off as the creature lunged forward with shocking speed. The water around us churned violently as its movement created powerful currents that slammed into our vessel. The Mako rocked sideways, throwing us against our restraints. I fought the controls, trying to stabilize our position while maintaining our backward retreat. The creature filled our entire forward viewport now, its circular mouth expanding to a diameter that could easily engulf our entire submarine. "Keep recording," I shouted to Andrew as he clung to his station. "The surface needs to see this." The proximity alarms screamed throughout the cabin, warning of imminent collision. I pushed the submarine into an upward evasive maneuver, trying to escape by changing our depth plane. We didn't move fast enough. The impact hit our port side with devastating force. The Mako spun violently, systems blaring warnings as the hull stress indicators spiked into critical ranges. The lights flashed, plunging us momentarily into darkness before the emergency systems kicked in. When the lights returned, I looked left toward Andrew's station and was terrified. A spiderweb of cracks had appeared across his viewing compartment, the reinforced glass designed to withstand immense pressure now compromised by the creature's strike. "Andrew!" I shouted. His eyes met mine for one fraction of a second, wide with terror, understanding what was about to happen. The cracks expanded rapidly as the immense water pressure found its weakness. "Seal it!" Thomas screamed, already reaching for the emergency bulkhead controls. I jumped toward Andrew, but it was too late. The viewport broke inward with a loud crack. Water rushed into the cabin like a fire hose, pushing Andrew against the back of his station before the pressure pulled him toward the hole. His hands grabbed at the console, but the force was too strong. He disappeared through the broken viewport in a rush of bubbling water, straight into the pale round mouth that was waiting outside our submarine. My training kicked in. I hit the emergency bulkhead release, sealing off the damaged section of the submarine. The thick metal barrier slid into place with a thud, stopping the water from coming in. What was already inside splashed around our feet as the cabin tilted with the submarine's new imbalance. I knew what I had done. I had saved Thomas and myself by sealing Andrew outside. There was no choice. The entire submarine would have flooded in seconds otherwise. The reality of what I'd just done was overwhelming. For 1 second, I froze, seeing Andrew's final scared face in my mind. The submarine shook again, snapping me back to reality. The creature was still out there, and we were broken and in danger. "Emergency ascent protocol," I ordered, my voice sounding distant to my own ears as I fought to push aside the image of Andrew's death. "Now!" Thomas looked pale and was shaking uncontrollably, but his hands moved across his console with practiced precision, initiating the emergency procedures we had drilled countless times but never expected to use. "Purging all ballast tanks," he reported, his voice cracking. angling nose to 30 degrees. Ascent engines at maximum power. The Mako responded, tilting upward and beginning its climb toward the surface. The depth gauge numbers began to decrease. 348 meters, 345, 342. Too slow, I muttered, pushing the engine throttles beyond their recommended limits. Warning lights flashed across my console, but I ignored them. Engine overheating was the least of our concerns. The creature, Thomas started, then stopped to collect himself. The creature is circling back around, coming up from below us. I glanced at his sonar display, which showed the massive cylindrical shape moving in a wide arc, then turning upward to intercept our ascent path. Its speed was incredible for something so large. "How long to reach 200 meters?" I asked, calculating our options, what few we had. "At current ascent rate, 4 minutes minimum," Thomas replied, wiping sweat from his forehead with a trembling hand. The creature would reach us long before then. I thought of Andrew, gone in an instant. We'd end up the same way if I couldn't find a way to move upward faster or dodge the thing coming after us. Water kept coming through backup seals around the emergency bulkhead, pooling at our feet. The cabin smelled of seawater and electrical parts that had shorted out during the crash. The emergency lighting turned everything red, matching the blaring alarms still going off. "Thomas, what's our hull integrity?" I needed to know how much more abuse we could take. He checked the diagnostic panel. "Compromised but holding. We've lost approximately 18% structural integrity on the port side. Another direct hit on that section would be..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The depth gauge continued its painfully slow countdown. 334 meters, 331, 328. On Thomas's sonar, the creature continued its upward approach, closing the distance with every second. Its massive body moved faster than any sea creature should be able to, breaking all the rules I knew about ocean life. I felt scared and desperate as I pushed our damaged submarine toward the surface, away from the depths that had just claimed one of my team. Behind us, the pale monster swam up for another attack. The depth gauge went backwards so slowly. 325 meters, 322, 319. Every meter closer to the surface meant we'd live a bit longer, but the creature below us wasn't making it easy. I kept both hands on the controls, changing our angle to help us move up faster. "It's still following," Thomas said. His voice had taken on a flat, almost mechanical quality that professionals develop when processing trauma while still functioning. Moving in a spiral pattern beneath us. "How fast is it gaining?" I asked, not taking my eyes off the instrument panel. Thomas studied the sonar display. "Hard to tell. It's not coming straight up. It's circling, like it's studying us." That thought made me freeze up with fear. Intelligence in a predator this size was a terrifying prospect. I pushed the ascent engines harder, watching the temperature gauges climb into the yellow warning zone. We were asking more from the Mako than it was designed to give. Hull integrity? I needed constant updates on our most vulnerable point. "Holding at 81% on the port side. No change," Thomas replied, wiping condensation from his screen. "But the water ingress is accelerating." He wasn't wrong. The puddle at our feet had become a shallow pool that splashed with each small tilt of the submarine. The electrical systems wouldn't handle water for long, and neither would our emergency oxygen generators if the water reached them. "We need to buy time," I said, scanning the control panel for options we hadn't yet deployed. My eyes landed on the weapons subsystem, a feature rarely needed on research dives but included for situations exactly like this. "The defense system. Is it operational?" Thomas switched his display to the weapons control interface. "Yes, emergency harpoon is armed and ready, but Mike..." He paused. "It's designed for sharks and medium-sized predators. Whatever that thing is, it's bigger than anything the designers had in mind." "We don't need to kill it," I replied, the image of Andrew's final moments flashing through my mind. "We just need to slow it down." The depth gauge continued its countdown. 298 meters, 295, 292. We were going up too slowly. At this rate, the creature would catch us before we got to safer, shallower waters. Thomas worked the weapons console, turning on the targeting system. The small screen showed our path underwater and the huge shape below us in basic digital lines that couldn't show how terrifying it really was. "Targeting system active," he reported. "Manual aim only. The automation's not designed for something this size." I nodded, keeping us on our ascent trajectory while Thomas handled the defense system. The creature continued its spiral ascent below us, closing the distance with each circuit. "It's changing pattern," Thomas said suddenly, tension breaking through his controlled tone. "It's coming up directly beneath us, fast." The sonar display confirmed his words. The massive shape had abandoned its circular pattern and was now accelerating straight toward our underside. The distance closed rapidly. 80 meters, 60, 40. "Wait for a clear shot," I instructed, fighting to keep my voice calm. "We only get one chance." Thomas positioned his finger over the firing control. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cooling systems working overtime in our sealed environment. 30 meters and closing, he counted down. 20. The submarine's sensitive hull picked up vibrations as the creature's massive form displaced water below us. The feeling transferred through the metal into our bodies. A deep, thrumming pressure wave that seemed to penetrate bone and tissue. 10 meters! Now! I shouted. Thomas slammed his hand down on the firing control. The submarine shuddered as the emergency harpoon launched from its housing beneath our hull. The weapons display showed its trajectory, a straight line intercepting the approaching monster. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the entire submarine vibrated with the impact. The sonar display erupted with chaotic readings as the creature's movement pattern disintegrated into frantic thrashing. "Direct hit," Thomas reported, his eyes wide as he interpreted the readings. "Looks like... I think it hit the mouth area." Through the working viewport, I saw darkness spreading in the water below us, a cloud of fluid expanding from where the harpoon had struck. Blood, or whatever passed for blood in that thing. The thrasher stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The sonar showed the creature dropping back, its huge body sinking several dozen meters as it pulled away from the injury. "Keep going up," I ordered, pushing our engines harder despite the warning lights now flashing across multiple systems. "That won't stop it for long." I was right. After roughly 4 minutes of unimpeded ascent, during which we'd managed to reach 267 meters, Thomas's console pinged with renewed activity. "It's coming back," he said, resignation heavy in his voice. "Slower, but still ascending. Looks like it's favoring one side." We'd heard it, but not enough. The depth gauge kept dropping. 264 meters, 261, 258. The water inside the cabin was now up to our shins, so we had to put all the loose stuff on higher surfaces. "We need more speed," I said, studying our options on the control panel. Most of the emergency protocols were already engaged. Our engines were redlining. Hull integrity was holding but wouldn't tolerate much more stress. There was one option left, but it came with significant risks. "Thomas, prepare for emergency ballast release." His head snapped up. "Full release? Mike, that could..." "I know what it could do," I cut him off. "But we need to move faster. It's gaining on us again." The emergency ballast release was our last resort to quickly drop weight by dumping all remaining ballast water at once, instead of the controlled release we'd normally use. The quick change in buoyancy would shoot us upward, but it would also make us dangerously unstable and could damage the structure from the fast pressure changes. Thomas looked at me for a second, then nodded and started the preparation sequence. Emergency ballast release standing by, securing all loose equipment. We strapped ourselves tighter into our seats and secured everything that might fly around during the sudden acceleration. "On my mark," I said, watching the sonar as the creature steadily gained on us. It had closed to within 100 meters and was accelerating again, apparently recovering from the harpoon strike. 3, 2, 1, release. Thomas hit the emergency control. A series of explosive bolts fired simultaneously, blowing the external ballast tank covers clean off the submarine. Compressed air blasted into the tanks, forcing the remaining water out in a violent expulsion. The effect was immediate and violent. The Mako lurched upward with stomach-dropping speed, throwing us hard against our restraints. Warning alarms blared as we accelerated far beyond our designed ascent rate. The submarine rolled alarmingly to starboard, then back to port, struggling to find equilibrium with its ballast systems completely emptied. The depth gauge numbers decreased rapidly now, 235, 220, 205, the digits blurring as we rocketed toward the surface. Each rapid decrease in external pressure created new stresses on our already damaged hull. At approximately 150 meters, a new alarm joined the chorus of warnings. A structural integrity alert flashed red on my console. "Hull deformation on the port quarter," Thomas shouted over the noise. "Pressure differential is creating microfractures along the damaged section." The submarine had ascended too quickly for the internal pressure systems to properly compensate. The rapid decrease in external pressure meant our internal pressure was now higher than outside, the opposite of our normal state at depth. The hull, designed primarily to withstand crushing rather than expansion, was struggling with a reversal. I reached for the ascent control override, preparing to slow our climb to allow the pressure systems to equalize. "No choice," I said, mostly to myself. "We have to maintain speed." I bypassed the safety protocols, manually acknowledging each warning as it appeared. The computer tried to enforce programmed safety parameters, but each one could be overridden with the right command sequence. A feature designed for emergencies exactly like this one. "What are you doing?" Thomas asked, watching as I systematically disabled safety feature after safety feature. "Choosing between bad options," I replied, finishing the override sequence. "We either risk hull fracture from rapid decompression, or we let that thing catch us again. I'm picking the option where we might survive." A particularly loud groan from the hull emphasized my point. We were gambling our lives on reaching the surface before the submarine tore itself apart, or before the creature caught up to us again. Thomas reached for the communications panel. "We should try to contact the Oceanic Explorer. Let them know what's happening." He activated the ultra-low frequency communication system and adjusted it to broadcast on our emergency channel. "Oceanic Explorer, this is Mako. Mayday, Mayday. We are in emergency ascent with severe hull damage. Estimated surface breach in approximately 3 minutes. Andrew is dead. Repeat, Andrew is dead." His voice caught on the last words, the reality of what had happened temporarily breaking through his professional demeanor. "We are being pursued by an unknown marine organism of unprecedented size. Request immediate extraction upon surfacing. Over." The response came back distorted and broken. "Mako, position. Prepare for standing by." "They heard us," Thomas said, "at least partially." The depth gauge showed 118 meters when the submarine shuddered violently. A massive impact transmitted through the hull from below, throwing us sideways in our seats. "It hit us!" Thomas shouted, checking the damage displays. "Glancing contact on the underside. Hull integrity down another 7%. The creature had caught up to us despite our increased speed. The sonar showed it directly below now, pacing us perfectly, as if it had adapted to our new velocity. 200 meters to surface, Thomas announced, his voice barely audible over the groaning metal and blaring alarms. Water kept rising around our legs, now up to mid-thigh level as we sat strapped in our chairs. The electrical system sparked occasionally as important parts got wet. Our communication system died completely, leaving us cut off from the surface. The final push to safety turned into a race counted in meters and seconds. The depth gauge ticked down, 87 meters, 76, 65, while the hull made more and more scary noises. Rivets snapped loudly as metal bent too far. The whole submarine shook as the engines worked harder than they were supposed to. Through it all, The creature stayed right below us. The sonar showed it almost touching our exhaust ports, so close that the heat from our engines must have been blasting over whatever counted as its face. Its huge round mouth opened and closed on the screen, the same mouth I had watched swallow Andrew what seemed like hours ago but had been only minutes. I held the controls tightly as we raced toward light and air. The darkness outside our windows had slowly changed to deep blue as we got closer to where sunlight could reach. The surface, and possible safety, was just meters above us. Light exploded across the viewport as we broke the surface. The Mako crashed through the waves with a violent lurch, sending water over the external camera housings. After the darkness of the deep, the brightness of day hurt my eyes badly. The submarine rolled sickeningly in the surface chop. Water still sloshed around my knees inside the cabin, rising with each passing minute as more leaked through the damaged seals. Electrical systems sparked and sizzled as critical junctions became submerged. "We made it," I breathed, not quite believing it myself. Through the remaining functional viewport, I spotted the Oceanic Explorer about 100 meters away. The research vessel pitched in the waves, its white hull shining under the midday sun. Crew members ran across the deck in organized chaos, some pointing toward us while others worked to position the recovery crane. The radio crackled to life with sudden clarity after the interference at depth. Captain Martinez's voice filled our cabin, tight with controlled urgency. "Mako, this is Oceanic Explorer. We have visual. Stand by for immediate recovery. Repeat, stand by for immediate recovery." I grabbed the microphone, my fingers leaving wet smears on the plastic. "Oceanic Explorer, this is Mako. We are severely damaged with flooding in progress. Andrew is dead. We have an unknown hostile entity directly beneath us." There was a brief pause before Martinez answered. His voice stayed calm even after hearing the shocking news. "Understood, Mako. Recovery team is deploying now. Stand by for cable drop in 30 seconds. Thomas looked at the sonar display. "It's still there," he said, pointing at the big shape below us. "Circling at about 20 meters down, moving in a tighter and tighter pattern." I watched the Oceanic Explorer's crew swing the recovery crane over the water. The steel cable went down fast, its hook moving toward our position. The winds had gotten stronger, making the recovery harder as both boats rocked in the waves. "They'll never get a clean connection with us pitching like this," I said, mentally calculating our options. The submarine's systems were failing by the minute. We had perhaps 10 minutes before electrical failure became catastrophic. "I need to go out and guide it in." Thomas looked at me sharply. "Out? With that thing down there?" I nodded, already unstrapping from my seat. "No choice. We've got minutes before we lose power completely. If that happens, we sink back down to it." The water inside the cabin had risen to mid-thigh level as I stood. I climbed the short ladder to the emergency exit hatch above the control station and spun the manual release wheel. The metal groaned, but eventually gave way, allowing fresh air to rush into our pressurized compartment for the first time in hours. Wind and spray hit my face as I pushed the hatch fully open. The sounds of the ocean, waves breaking against our hull, seabirds calling overhead, the distant drone of the Oceanic Explorer's engines, washed over me after hours of mechanical noise and alarms. I pulled myself through the hatch and onto the curved exterior of the Mako. The wet metal was slippery under my boots as the submarine rolled with each wave. I crawled along the hull toward the forward lifting point where the recovery hook needed to connect. Waves crashed over the partially submerged vessel, soaking me repeatedly and threatening to wash me overboard. I gripped maintenance handholds designed for dockside work, never intended to serve as lifelines in rough seas. 20 feet away, the recovery cable swung with the movement of both vessels, its heavy hook shining in the sunlight. I heard Martinez's voice from a loudspeaker on the ship. "Cable deployment complete. Mako, confirm visual on hook." Thomas must have responded from inside because the cable began to lower further, bringing the hook within reach if I could time my grab correctly. The Mako rose on a wave crest just as the hook swung near. I lunged forward, fingers stretching toward the cold metal. My hand closed around nothing as the submarine dropped into a trough, the hook swinging harmlessly above me. I cursed and repositioned, watching the pattern of the waves to time my next attempt. Below us, invisible but present on Thomas's sonar, the creature continued its circular ascent. On my third attempt, my fingers brushed the hook. On the fourth, I managed to grab it and pull it toward me. I worked to align it with the lifting bracket on the Mako's bow. Almost there, I muttered through gritted teeth, forcing the hook into position. The satisfying sound of steel meeting steel, followed by the safety latch clicking into place, sent a surge of relief through me. "Connection secured!" I shouted toward the ship. The cable immediately tensed as the winch began to pull. The submarine lurched upward, partially rising from the water as the powerful motors on the Oceanic Explorer's crane took our weight. Water streamed from the hull as we slowly lifted clear of the waves. Then everything went wrong. The Mako jerked violently, dropping several feet before the cable caught us again. The sudden movement nearly threw me from my precarious position. A terrible scraping sound came from below, metal against something far harder than water. "It's got us!" Thomas screamed from inside, his voice barely audible over the groan of stressed metal. I held onto a grip, looking over the side to see what had happened. The creature had come up enough to latch its big round mouth onto the bottom part of our submarine. The pale see-through skin was all over the metal hull, with hook-like parts scraping against the already damaged left side. The submarine tipped over as the creature's weight pulled against the cable. The metal made awful noises as the forces tried to rip the Mako apart. The winch motors on the Oceanic Explorer made loud noises at full power, trying to lift both us and the huge creature stuck to us. Thomas had climbed halfway through the hatch, holding a camera in one hand while grabbing the rim with the other. His feet tried to find something to stand on as the submarine tipped more. He lost his grip and slid toward the edge, picking up speed down the curved hull. Just in time, his hand caught a sticking-out sensor box near the middle of the submarine. He hung there, legs swinging over the open water where the creature was eating our vessel. I made a quick decision. Instead of trying to reach Thomas, I crawled back toward the open hatch. Waves kept crashing over us as we were being lifted, making every move a fight against water and gravity. I got to the hatch and stuck my upper body back into the flooded cabin. The control panel gave off a faint light under the rising water. I reached for the external lighting controls, my fingers barely touching the emergency switch. With one final push, I turned on full power to all working external floodlights. Bright white light shot from every undamaged light on the Mako's hull, right into the creature. It worked right away. The pressure on our hull suddenly stopped as the creature backed away from the intense light. Its basic eyes were clearly made for deep ocean darkness, not these bright beams. The submarine jerked upward as the winch, now free from the pulling force, lifted us quickly toward the ship. I pulled myself back onto the outside hull and saw Thomas still hanging onto the sensor box. I crawled to him, grabbed his arm, and helped him climb back toward the hatch. "Inside, now!" I shouted over the wind and waves. We tumbled through the hatch just as the Mako cleared the water completely. Through the open hatch, I caught a last look at the ocean below us. The creature's huge body had moved to deeper water, but I could still see its outline beneath the waves. A massive cylinder of pale tissue slowly circling the ship at about 30 meters down. The winch kept pulling us up toward the safety of the Oceanic Explorer's deck. But seeing it circle so patiently, the steady movement of something that shouldn't exist, told me this wasn't over. It had just backed away because of our unexpected defense. It was still there, waiting. The Mako landed hard on the Oceanic Explorer's deck with a crash that shook its damaged hull. The submarine rocked as the crane operators tried to stabilize it. Through the open hatch, I saw crew members running toward us, looking both relieved and worried. Thomas pulled himself out first, moving stiffly. I followed right behind, my muscles hurting badly. The sudden brightness after hours in the dim submarine made me squint as I crawled onto the deck. My clothes were soaked through. We both dropped onto the solid surface. Standing on something that wasn't moving or flooding felt amazing to my tired body. I fell to my knees, taking deep breaths of fresh air that didn't smell like smoke or salt water. Captain Martinez pushed through the crowd, his face showing urgent concern. "What happened down there?" he demanded, eyes darting between us and the visibly damaged submarine. I tried to explain, but my thoughts went all over the place. How could I possibly tell them what we'd seen? The words got stuck in my throat. "Something attacked us," I managed, my voice raw. "Andrew's gone, pulled right through the viewport." Martinez's expression hardened as he assessed the shattered viewport section of the Mako. His decision came instantly. "All hands!" he shouted, turning to the crew. "Prepare for immediate departure! Full power as soon as we're secure!" The deck burst into action. Crew members ran to their stations while others worked quickly to secure our damaged submarine with chains and straps. The recovery crane pulled back with mechanical sounds. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't work. 2 crew members helped me to a nearby box where I could sit. Thomas sat beside me. His eyes looked empty and distant. "Captain," I called out, struggling to organize my thoughts. "You need to understand what's down there. It's huge, at least 40 meters. Some kind of deep-sea predator we've never... Save it for when we're moving." Martinez cut me off, already turning toward the bridge. "We need distance first." The ship's engines roared to life beneath us, shaking through the deck plates and into my bones. The Oceanic Explorer started turning away from our dive site, pushing through the water faster and faster. A crew member with a medical kit came over to us. He checked Thomas first, cleaning a cut on his forearm. Then he turned to me, looking at my pupils and asking basic questions I had trouble answering. "I need to tell the captain," I insisted, trying to stand again, "about what we saw. You don't understand how dangerous." "You need to stay still," the medic countered, firmly pushing me back onto the crate. "You're both showing signs of shock." My hands shook like crazy. Cold sweat ran down my forehead in the warm weather. I couldn't think straight. All I kept seeing was Andrew's face when that round mouth pulled him in. The Oceanic Explorer raced through the waves faster and faster. Martinez clearly wanted to get as far away as possible from whatever was down there. If only he knew that probably wouldn't help. 8 minutes later, it happened. The impact came out of nowhere. Something huge hit the ship from below and made the whole thing shake violently. Anyone standing fell to the deck. Equipment slid everywhere. The ship tipped hard to one side before trying to straighten out. "It's back!" Thomas shouted, suddenly alert. I grabbed the edge of the crate and pulled myself upright. On unsteady legs, I staggered toward the starboard railing with Thomas close behind. When we reached the edge, I gripped the cold metal and looked down. There, just beneath the surface, moved the pale, massive shape I'd hoped never to see again. It crashed against the hull, its huge body sliding along the ship's metal plating like it was searching for weak spots. Alarms started blaring throughout the vessel. A crew member ran past us, shouting about water flowing into the lower compartments. The creature had broken through the hull below the waterline. "We need to tell Martinez," I said, turning from the railing. "It won't stop. Not now that it's found us." Thomas nodded with determination. He grabbed my arm, helping me stay up as we headed toward the bridge. The deck moved under our feet as the ship tilted slightly to the right where the creature had hit. We'd made it halfway when the second hit came. This one hit harder, knocking us both down. The ship tipped left, then back to the right. Equipment broke loose and slid across the tilted deck. I looked up and saw 3 crew members near the front lose their balance. They slid across the wet deck, trying to grab onto anything. Their screams stopped suddenly as they fell over the side, disappearing into the rough water where the creature waited. Thomas grabbed my jacket, pulling me toward a cargo net that was tied down. We held on as the ship rocked back and forth. When the deck got steady enough to stand, we kept going toward the bridge, moving from one handhold to the next. We got to the bridge ladder just as Captain Martinez showed up at the top. His eyes met mine, and I saw something I never thought I'd see from the tough captain. Real fear. "Get up here," he ordered, extending a hand to help us climb. The bridge was in controlled chaos. Officers called out damage reports while others worked to fix the ship's systems. The navigator struggled with controls that weren't responding well. The radar screen showed nothing but empty ocean for miles, no help nearby. "Radio operator reports no response to our mayday," an officer informed Martinez. "Nearest vessel is a tanker approximately 28 nautical miles northeast." Martinez nodded grimly. "Keep broadcasting. Switch to all emergency frequencies." He turned to Thomas and me. "Now tell me what we're dealing with." Before I could answer, the third impact hit. This one struck with such force that it seemed to lift the entire ship before dropping it back. The bridge windows showed us a terrifying view as the vessel tilted badly to port. The angle got so steep that bolted down equipment tore free. The navigator fell across the room, crashing into the opposite wall hard enough to break bones. Through the forward windows, I watched as the ocean seemed to rise up to meet us. The port side dipped so low that waves washed over the rail, flooding across the main deck. Crew members who hadn't secured themselves disappeared under the rushing water. "All hands, brace for impact!" Martinez shouted into the ship-wide communication system. I grabbed a cabinet on the wall to keep my balance, but the ship jerked and I fell sideways. My head hit metal hard. Pain shot through my head as my vision got fuzzy. I slid down the tilted floor. Couldn't stop myself. Through my blurry vision, I saw the creature break the surface next to our ship. Water poured off its pale body as it came up beside us, way bigger than our research ship. Its round mouth opened wide, showing rings of white hooks that had eaten Andrew. The last thing I saw before passing out was this massive thing jumping through the air above us, coming down hard right on the middle of our ship. Then everything went dark. I woke up with a taste of copper in my mouth. Pain throbbed through my skull in steady waves, each pulse bringing a new level of awareness. My right arm wouldn't move when I tried to lift it. Something soft but restraining held it in place against my side. Pieces of memory flashed behind my eyelids, water rushing over the deck, the ship tilting at an impossible angle, and that massive pale shape arcing through the air toward us. I forced my eyes open, blinking against the harsh light of a medical lamp above me. "He's awake," someone said nearby. I turned my head toward the voice, but it hurt my neck and shoulder when I moved. Thomas sat on a makeshift bed about 3 feet away with his back against a storage locker. His face was covered in cuts and bruises that were still forming. He had a thick white bandage around his forehead with blood spots near his left temple. His right arm was in a basic sling made from what looked like a torn life vest. "Welcome back," he said. His voice sounded flat, drained of emotion. "You've been out about 12 hours. 12 hours. The realization hit me as I took in my surroundings. We weren't in the ship's proper medical bay, but in what appeared to be a hastily arranged treatment area on the main deck. Tarps had been strung overhead to create a sheltered space. 5 other injured crew members lay on similar makeshift cots around us. Medical supplies were stacked in plastic containers along one wall. An IV bag hung from a jury-rigged stand beside me, its tube running to a needle in my left arm. I tried to sit up, fighting against pain and dizziness. "Stay down," Thomas warned. "Doctor said you have a concussion, 3 broken ribs too, and your shoulder was dislocated." That explained why my right arm couldn't move. I ignored his advice and pushed myself up with my good arm, gritting my teeth against the stabbing pain in my side. The movement made the room spin, but I pushed through it. "The ship?" I asked, my voice a dry rasp. Thomas looked away, his eyes catching something through a gap in the tarps. "Bad. Really bad." After a pause, he added, "We're lucky to still be floating." As if answering him, the deck under us moved with a worrying groan. The movement wasn't normal, not the natural response of a vessel to waves. This felt wrong, like a building about to collapse. The creature? Thomas shook his head. Gone. At least as far as our remaining sonar can tell. Heavy footsteps approached from outside our makeshift shelter. Captain Martinez ducked under the tarp, his uniform torn and stained. A makeshift bandage covered his left forearm, blood seeping through the edges. His face had aged a decade since I'd last seen him. "Anderson, good to see you conscious." His voice carried none of its usual command presence. It was hollow, like a man speaking from the bottom of a well. "How bad?" I asked. Martinez's expression hardened. 8 confirmed dead, 5 missing, presumed swept overboard during the attack. He paused, shoulders dropping slightly. "Including your friend Andrew makes 14 total. 14 dead." I couldn't believe it. I remembered Andrew's terrified face as he was pulled through the shattered viewport. I tried not to think about it and focused on our current situation. "The ship?" "Barely holding together," Martinez said. "We've sealed off the lower decks where the hull breaches are worst. Engine room is completely flooded. We're running on emergency generators, but they won't last more than another day." He glanced at his watch. "Mexican Coast Guard responded to our distress call. They have a vessel en route, ETA about 5 hours from now." 5 hours. I nodded, processing the information. 5 hours until rescue, if the ship could stay afloat that long. "I need to get up," I said. Thomas started to object, but I cut him off with a look. With Martinez helping me, even though he didn't want to, I put my legs over the edge of the cot and stood up. I got really dizzy, but I kept breathing until it got better. After a bit, I felt less dizzy, though I was still a bit shaky. I walked slowly to the edge of the tarp shelter and looked at what was left of the Oceanic Explorer. What I saw took my breath away. The research ship was completely wrecked. The left side was sinking low in the water with waves sometimes washing over the broken railing. Sharp pieces of metal stuck out from the deck where equipment had been torn off during the attack or the chaos afterward. Broken cables hung from the damaged structures above. There were dark bloodstains on the deck where crew members had died. The worst damage was the huge dent in the middle of the ship where the creature had hit it full force. The deck had been pushed in about 6 feet, crushing everything underneath. The metal around the impact point was all bent and warped. The people who survived were moving around the wreckage, tying down loose stuff, using portable pumps to get rid of the water coming in, or just staring blankly at the horizon. They all had the same look on their faces. It wasn't exactly fear, but something more serious. They looked like they'd seen something they couldn't understand. "The Mako," I said, turning back to Martinez. "It's still secured." He nodded. "For what it's worth. Crane's damaged, so we couldn't move it if we wanted to." I walked past him, limping slowly toward our submarine. Thomas stayed close behind, helping steady me when I wobbled. Every step hurt my ribs, but I kept going. The Mako looked worse in daylight than during our escape. The entire left window section was torn off, leaving a big hole in the submarine's side. The hull was beat up and scratched where the creature had grabbed on during our trip to the surface. Most of the outside lights were broken, with just bent metal where they used to be. "I need to get inside," I told Thomas. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Why?" "There's nothing in there worth risking your neck for, and you can barely stand." "The data recorder," I explained. "The camera unit. It has footage of the creature." He understood. He didn't argue more, instead helping me get to the Mako's emergency hatch. The submarine had no water in it anymore, but inside was still a wet mess of broken electronics and floating junk. Thomas helped me climb inside. The control console where I'd sat yesterday was now ruined by water. The window where Andrew had worked was completely gone, with only bent metal where the strong glass used to be. I moved carefully to the tech area where Thomas had worked during our dive. The data recorder was a special waterproof box under the main console. I pulled off its cover and took out the silver camera part from inside. The unit's light was green. The data was okay. Thomas helped me back to the deck. Martinez was waiting for us. "Got what you needed?" he asked. I held up the camera module. Everything the external cameras recorded. It's the only clear footage of whatever that thing was. Martinez nodded. Use my office. It's on the starboard side, still relatively intact. Thomas and I made our way slowly across the tilting deck to the captain's office. Inside, we found a space that had mostly escaped the destruction that had hit most of the ship. The computer was still working, running on emergency power. I put the camera module into the right port and started the playback software. The monitor blinked, then showed a grid of camera feeds from different points on the Mako's exterior. I selected the main forward camera and started the playback from just before our first visual contact with the creature. Grainy, blue-tinted footage filled the screen. At first, there was nothing but empty water and particles floating in the submarine's lights. Then something massive and cylindrical came out of the darkness. Thomas leaned forward and started breathing faster. There. Freeze it there. I paused the footage. The image showed the creature in profile as it approached the submarine. Its body was see-through, showing dark shapes inside its pale outer layer. We could now see it had complex internal features, not just the simple tube shape we thought we saw before. Look at this, Thomas said, pointing to several dark spots arranged in patterns along the creature's body. These aren't random. They're specialized light-sensitive organs. Not eyes, but something that can detect changes in light intensity. That's why it reacted when you blasted it with the floodlights. I went through the footage frame by frame, looking at how the creature moved. Its way of moving doesn't match any known octopus or marine mammal, I said. It's not using fins or moving like a squid would. Thomas nodded. And check out these parts. He pointed to what looked like complex, gill-like formations on the creature's middle section. They're not just for breathing. They're some kind of biomechanical part. I've never seen anything like it. We kept analyzing the footage, stopping often to look at specific features. The creature's circular mouth, with its rings of hook-like parts, didn't fit with normal evolution. The tissue makeup showed it could handle extreme pressure, way more than most deep-sea creatures could. This isn't just an undiscovered species, I said finally. This is something primordial. It doesn't fit into any known evolutionary branch. Thomas sat back, rubbing his eyes with his good hand. The deep trenches. That's where it must have come from. Parts of the ocean we've never been able to properly explore. It could have been down there for millions of years, evolving in isolation. The idea hit me hard. What we'd found wasn't just some new species. It was proof of a completely unknown ecosystem that had grown separately from life on the surface, way down in those deep ocean trenches. And considering how big and predatory it was, it probably ruled whatever food chain it belonged to. It attacked a military vessel to get their antenna, I said, connecting the pieces aloud. Then it came after us. Then the ship. It's not just hunting by opportunity. It's deliberately targeting human technology. Thomas looked at me. You think it's intelligent? I replayed the footage of the creature circling beneath our submarine, studying us before attacking. I don't know if it's intelligent in the way we define it. But it's not just instinct either. There's something purposeful about its behavior. A shout from outside interrupted our analysis. Looking through the office window, I saw crew members pointing toward the horizon. A tiny pinpoint of light was visible in the growing dusk, the running lights of an approaching vessel. Coast Guard, Thomas said, relief evident in his voice. I nodded, but wasn't comforted by the approaching rescue. Instead, I felt more sure about what I needed to do next. The footage playing on the screen had changed everything. The world I thought I understood no longer existed. I'm going back, I said quietly. Thomas turned to me, confusion on his face. What? Not today, not tomorrow. But I'm going back down there. With better equipment, better protection. I need to understand what this is. What we found. You can't be serious, Thomas said. After what happened? After Andrew? After all this? He gestured toward the window, indicating the devastated ship beyond. Because of all that, I replied. Because of Andrew. Because 14 people died. Because that thing is still down there. I looked at the frozen image on the screen. That impossible creature that completely changed what I thought about life on Earth. Right then, I knew my life would never be the same. All the things I was sure about were gone, replaced by a scary truth. Humans weren't running the show on this planet. We just lived on top, not knowing what really controlled the deep water. The creature we saw was just one of many strange beings living in another world under ours, and I'd only seen a hint of how dangerous it could be. Outside, the Coast Guard boat got closer, its lights getting brighter as it came toward us. Help was on the way. We would be saved, taken back to shore, back to regular life. But I knew I would never look at the world the same way again. The ocean used to be where I worked, what I loved. Now it had turned into something completely different. It was just a small space keeping people away from scary things we never knew were there, and I had looked straight at them.